So coming to our next topic, the basic building blocks of Angular, right? So just to imagine this building blocks, right? So basically, how a building construction is done. Basically, a building construction is done using the bricks, right? So if there are no bricks, there is no other way you can construct a building. Or if there is no the cement, or if there is no iron, so basically we cannot construct a building, right? The same way. So these are the basic building blocks of the entire Angular framework. So without these, you cannot build Angular application. So, so all these independent features put together, and we call it as Angular framework, right? So without these things, then there is no Angular framework. So the first one is the order must be different, but the first one must be the component. So component is the basic building block of the entire Angular framework. There is no component, there is no Angular framework. So component is we can anyhow this cover this one little deeper going forward, but I'll just give a brief overview. So component is something like a patch of user interface like this. We are having a little section here, right? Getting started. This is entirely a different component, and the same way this one is the entire component, and this button is a different component, and this entire row, right? So this is basically a component. So this way we can split the entire screen, the user interface, and uh, and it will have its own user interface. I mean the HTML and the styles. I'm basically whenever I hold the little styles are coming, right, the background shadow is changing. So all these styles and this icon and alignment, basically we use CSS to do all these things. But when I click on this, it is moving, right? So basically it is hiding and showing. This is basically behavior. We can call it a behavior. So each component will have three things. One is the HTML, that is this what you are seeing, and second one is the styles. Styles is nothing but the look and feel of your component, and the third one is the behavior. So this is a behavior. So whenever I'm clicking, something is happening, some action is happening. So that is a behavior. So each component will have three things. One is the behavior, second one is the HTML template, and third one is the styles or look and feel of your component. So so any Angular application, any big Angular application or small whatever it may be, so any Angular application is basically is set of components, nothing more, nothing less. So set of components. So you can call any Angular application is basically boils down to the set of components. Now coming to modules, let's say module is logical grouping of your building blocks. So for example, you have a college application. Let's say you're working on a college application. In that college application, you'll have students related information and departments related features, and then faculty related features and administrator related features, right? So you can write the entire application without modules, but basically you have to put all these features inside single place, and it will be difficult to maintain that project, right? So instead of that, they added this feature module. So you can create a module, and you can group all the student related features into that module, and department related features into department module, and their administrative task related features into the administrative module. So these modules are basically a logical separation of your components. So it's logical grouping of your components. So few components you can put in here, and few components you can put in a different module, and few other components you can put into some other module. So basically the advantage is basically you're categorizing your application into multiple modules, multiple separate modules, and each module will have only components or directives, pipes or anything, right? So routes, so related to only that particular feature set. So this is basically splitting your entire big application into small maintainable parts, and Angular will basically manage those when it is running. So it will be very easy to group things, and basically very easy to maintain your entire application easily. So that is the modules, and the other one is directives and pipes. So basically, there are some situations where we need to highlight something or add some new extra behavior to the existing HTML. Um, or basically, we can use if else and for each, and then the switch statement, right? So the switch conditional operator. So we in the template. So in those places we use directives. So those directives are used to uh, basically modify the DOM structure dynamically or to add some behavior to the existing elements. And we'll cover this anyhow. And the pipes are basically to add some extra things in your HTML. Let's say you want to display price, okay, some price of a product, and you want to display that R icon, the rupee icon before that, or dollar icon before that price. Then you can basically use pipes just before the price, and then we can the price will be appended with that whatever icon, the currency icon dynamically. So this is how we don't have to store the dollar symbol or the rupee symbol or any currency symbol in the database. So database you can store some number, but when it's displaying, you can basically add dynamically um, the symbol, a dollar symbol or rupee symbol based on wherever the user opens. If user from the India opens their application, we can show INR icon, Indian rupees icon. If user from USA opens the application, then we can show the dollar icon. So in many cases also we can use pipes. Something like, let's say you're displaying a date, but date is localized, right? So in USA, the format is different, and in India the format is different. In some other country the format is different, so we can use a date pipe to change the date dynamically, but in the database we can store only in one format, but while displaying it in the UI we can basically use these pipes to show in different ways. And the other building block is data binding. So data binding is another important feature in Angular, and it got very popularized in from Angular itself. So data binding is nothing but basically binding a variable from your TypeScript class and from your template, right? So basically binding the variable between the template and the TypeScript class. Let's say in your template, um, you want to store student name, so the student name variable is from the TypeScript class, student class. And if you change the student name in the TypeScript class, then immediately that value will be reflected in your templates without you having to do anything. So that is basically achievable using data binding, so that all complexity will be hidden inside your Angular framework. So only for you, you just have to create a student variable in your class and use the student variable inside your template, and Angular will take care of rest of the things. And routes is basically defining some routes. Route is nothing but these paths in your Angular application. Let's say if I click on this link, the path will change. Path is changed to home. So in the home, I'm showing these things. If I click on here, it changes the path, and in this path, a course Angular topics, I'm showing this one. So when I click on when I go down, I click on this building blocks of Angular, it will again go back to the same page which we were earlier, right? So this entire flow or navigation is managed by the routes, Angular routes. So uh, why we need routes? So can't we do without routes, right? So it is very difficult, because if it is a website, then you can have links. Whenever you click on a link, then it will update. It will basically open that page, and if you click on another link, it will again reload the page and it will update. It will go to that page, right? But in case of single page application, this is a single page application. What we are on, right? What we are looking at. This is a single page application. Single page application means there is only single page, single HTML page. You can just right click and go to the view page source. So if any page, let's say I'm in this page, right? So building blocks of Angular page, and my source code is this one. I have 27 lines of source code, right? So 27 lines of source code. Now let me go to the home page. So I click on home page and right click view page source. So I can see same lines of code. I don't see a single character change in the page, right? So basically, this is a single page application. I have only one HTML page, but everything, whatever we are doing, right? So when we are clicking the navigation or anything, the dynamic movements or all these actions, right? These are happening only inside using your the Angular framework. So Angular framework is taking care of doing all these things. So without changing this URL, we cannot change these things here, because the important feature we have to have is, let's say if I am in this page and if I click on back button, I should go to the previous page. So that is how browsers works, right? So instead of staying, if you, let's say if you are in the same page like this, and whatever we do, we are not updating this URL, we are just updating the page here. Then if I click on back button, where it will go, it doesn't know, right? So browser does not understand this back button functionality, because it was always on the same page and only content was updating, and a browser will not know where to go. So for that reason, the Angular router will add a route change here, so that in the browser history this route change will be recorded, and whenever you click on back, it will remember where to go back, or if I click on forward, it will remember where to go forward. So that's the reason the Angular roots add the roots here, or the paths change whenever you do something in the application. And also, if you define roots, then only the roots will come. So if you don't define root, the roots will not come. And templates is as we covered in the component section, right? So templates is basically your HTML. So as we discussed in our first class, browser will understand only three things. One is HTML, the second one is CSS, and the third one is JavaScript, right? So the template is HTML. So whatever HTML you write in Angular, that will be that we call as a template. And we have another module called services, another, I mean, the feature. Uh, the services basically used for writing your backend logic. Let's say your application is making a backend API call or backend REST service call to get some data. Let's say you're working on a student application, and the student application needs the student data, right? So for the student data, you need to call a backend student API. So for that, you have to create a service, and in that service, you can call the backend API and get the student data, and then pass on that data back to the components. So the components will render the data in the user interface. Because services will not have any view logic, or like they don't have any template, or they don't have any CSS or something like that. So services are just a pure TypeScript classes where you can write the backend connectivity code to call APIs and get data, or you can basically write some methods or common reusable logic. Let's say component A, component B are having some calculation logic, and you can create a common service, and then you put that calculation logic inside that service, and from the both components you can call the same service to execute the logic, right? So basically it will increase your reusability of code. You can write same code, you don't have to write two times that same code. You can write the same code in service, and you can use that service to call that methods wherever you want. You can call the same service in 100 components also, because the same service is can be injected into multiple components, and we can use that. And the third one, the eighth one is metadata. So metadata is, it's not a feature. Basically, metadata is nothing but when you are creating a service component, directives, modules, right? So basically, you will be using the ngCli. So just like how we use ngCli to create the new project, right? So we use ngCli to create the services, components, directives, pipes, and modules. So whenever you create, there should be some differentiation between these components, because all are TypeScript classes. So this one is TypeScript class, this one is TypeScript class, this one, and not this one, this one. So all these are TypeScript classes, right? There should be some differentiation in the TypeScript class, which tells, okay, this is a component, and this is a module, and this is a directive, and this is a service. So that differentiation basically you can tell with metadata. So we discussed the decorators, right? So we have different decorators. So if you have at the rate component decorator, then that is a component. If you have at the rate directive, then that is a directive. If you have at the rate injector, then that is a service. So that's how we can differentiate using the metadata. So that decorators are called metadata. And dependency injection. So as I said, we can create a single service, but we can inject into as many components as we need. So that is available through the dependency injection. So we'll use this dependency injection, but how we can create a service and we can inject that service into the TypeScript classes, and we don't worry about how Angular will inject that service into the application or the components. So Angular will take care of it internally. We don't have to worry about that complex logic of injecting services to components. So that injection part will be part of this topic. And apart from these 9 building blocks, we have modules, right? So important modules. So apart from this only building blocks, they gave us some tools. They gave us some inbuilt modules. So basically, as we were discussing, modules are different, basically a logical group of component services and directives, right? So in the same way, they gave to handle forms, input data, student form, or let's say sign up form, login form. To handle that forms data, they gave us forms module and reactive forms module. And to communicate with the backend API calls, they gave us the HTTP client module. And to handle the routes, right? So to use routes, basically you have to work on the routes module. And finally, there is another module called common modules. This common module have your the if else and for each loop and for loop, and then the switch statement, and then there are many common directives we use, ng class, ng styles, and then ng module. So ng model. So we have many common directives, these directives, right? So useful directives, they implemented in one module, they named it as common module. So this common module will be used across our application to basically reuse those directives created as part of this module. So this is the high level overview of entire Angular application. So going forward, we'll be covering each topic one by one, all the topics, and then we'll be covering all these modules. And then basically we are done with the entire Angular framework. So any questions? Like you understood the high level overview?
Yes, sir, I do.
Okay, cool. So now this part basically we'll cover in a later stage, because this is not useful now. Even if I tell also, it will be confusing. So now let's go to the next topic, components. Okay. As I said, components are basically the basic UI building blocks. Okay, whatever you are seeing in any Angular application, basically you'll be seeing the components, right? So even the Angular team itself defines that component is a basically it will control a patch of screen in your application. We call it as a view. So this is one component, and this is one component, this is one component. So basically it will control some section of the user interface, and that will have its own HTML and its own CSS, and then its own behavior, right? So that is called a component. So if we go to the component structure and how it looks like, right? So the component will look like this one. So this is a TypeScript class, right? So the greet component is a class of TypeScript, and then it is implementing an interface called onInit, and then it is basically we are using export so that this class will be available in other classes, right? The we saw TypeScript export and import. So this is that. And then we have a decorator here. And then we are using the import to import the component on init from Angular framework. This is framework library. And from this framework library, we're importing component and on init. These two things. The component is directive, your directive here. And on init is the interface. Okay. So this is your entire component structure. So this one we call as a component class, and this one we call as a metadata. So we saw the building, one of the building block is metadata, right? So this is the metadata. And then we are using the import section. So this is the import section. So this is how your component is split into 3 parts. So we'll not be touching any of this while we are working on the application. Only thing is here we'll be writing logic inside the component class. Okay. So just let me know if you don't understand anything here, because we'll be seeing this a lot going forward.
Yeah, I'm fine with this. But yeah, I can.
You understood, right? So this is the export we already saw while we were looking at TypeScript classes. And then this is basically class
The class
name, and
and we
implements some
implemented
interface. So this is part of Angular core. I'll tell like when we use Angular ng in it. And this is again a constructor, and we covered constructor also. And then this is the implementation, because we are implementing this interface, where basically we have to provide a implementation for the method inside the on init, right? So on init has an ng on init method, and we have to implement that method here.
Yes.
Okay. So I just go through the documentation. I mentioned each part here. Okay. And now what makes a component, right? So there are 3 things in the component, in your component metadata or like component decorator. You can see a selector and a template URL and a style URLs. So that selector is nothing but a reference or a tag name you are giving to your component. So let's say you want to use this component somewhere in other component, then how you can use it? You can basically use this as a HTML tag, like the Angular bracket app-greet, Angular bracket close, and then close the HTML tag. So that way you can use, just like how we use the app root, right? If you go here, and if I go to index.html, and here I can see app-root as a tag. This is not a built-in tag of HTML, right? So HTML doesn't have any tag of this name. So this is a custom tag written by us. Then that custom tag is basically nothing but our
App
component.
Yes.
Perfect. Yeah, this one. So the same way you can use the component from this one, you can use app-greet as open tag and app-greet as open tag. And yeah, this component will be rendered in wherever you're using that. So this is basically the reference or the tag name. And the second is the template URL. So as I said, each template will have its own HTML, right? So that HTML is inside this file, .greet component .html. This is nothing but your HTML file. And also I said each component will have its own CSS. So that is here. So the CSS used for this component will be part of this file. I can explain with simple example here. Let's say there is a component called student list, and this is our main file. Okay, this is our main component file. This is our TypeScript file. So the same thing we saw earlier, right? So export class student component implements some interface, and here is my decorator. This is my tag name, and this is my HTML file, and this is my CSS. So it is saying the current directory we have this file. So if you go here in the current directory, we have the HTML file.
HTML.
So if I click on this, I can see the HTML. So this HTML belongs to the student
This
list component.
components. Right.
Okay. And the same way, we have the student list component CSS that is here. And if you have any CSS here, that belongs to this
That
component.
component.
Okay.
Okay.
So because we have multiple files here, so that is enclosed in a folder, right? So because
So
let's say you
that's one
created
module.
not module, this is a component.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, component. Okay. Okay.
Component, because let's say if you have 10 components and you create 10 components without having a separate folder, then it will be difficult for you to maintain that code, right? So all will be
Okay.
mixed. So for that reason, they basically have separate folders for each component.
Each component. Okay.
Yes, and the other file here we are seeing that we have 4 files here. This one is spec file. Spec file is nothing but the test file. So if you are writing any test cases for this component, you will be writing inside this file. Okay, so now this is a capsule which holds HTML, CSS, and your business logic. So this is where the component file, right? So this is where you will write your business logic. You will write you will provide implementations, and you can define variables and your constructors here. And then you can write your methods. You can write as many number of methods as you need here. And this methods you can directly call from this template. And these variables you can directly use inside your HTML directly like this. So we'll cover those things, but just to give an idea, so a component is a capsule. It will have its own logic, and the business logic is in the TS file. The template logic or view logic inside that HTML file, and the look and feel or the CSS inside the CSS file. Okay. So now, how to create a component, right? So creating component is a straightforward command here in Angular. So you can just use ng generate component and the component name. You can give any component. So in the previous example, I showed the student hyphen list, right? So in that case, my component name was student hyphen list. So in order to basically they gave a short form for the same command. G for generate, C for component, and then your component name. So you can just say ng-gc component name, and then it will create the component. So I created a component. I can just let me execute this inside. I don't have say component, right? So I can basically go here, executed the command ng-gc quiz. So now whenever I execute this command, it created 4 files. One is the HTML file. First thing is it created the folder. Okay, I just gave this component that quiz. It created a folder, and inside that folder, it created a HTML file, and it created a spec file, the TS file, and the CSS file. The 4 files it created. So you can see the create statement here, and it updated the app module.ts. So what it updated app module.ts? Basically, it updated app module.ts to include this quiz component inside my app module.ts, because right, each component must be a part of a module. So here it added the quiz component. It added at the end of the declarations. Okay. So it created the component for you, I mean the 4 files, and it updated your app module.ts file to make this quiz component part of this app module. Okay. So we'll cover this app module later, but just to give an idea. So basically, whenever you create a component, it will show these 5 statements or 5 entries. It will create 4 files, and then it will update the module file. So here it is app module.ts, but if you are creating this component in some other module, then only that module will be updated. Okay. So here in the module file, there will be 3 sections. The one section is declarations, and the other section is imports, and the other section is providers. So the declarations basically it will list all the components in that module. So all these components are part of app module. So this I created for the previous classes, but this is how it looks. So if you create any component, that must be part of the declaration section. And let's say if you are importing, if you are using any modules, so we covered, right, the HTTP client module to basically communicate the backend APIs. So if we want to use that HTTP client module, I have to import here. If I want to use the common module, I have to import it here. If I want to use the routing module, forms module, React forms, all these modules must be imported in the import section. So basically, I am telling Angular that in my app module, these are my components, and I might need all these modules from it could be from Angular, or it could be from third-party libraries also. So I'll be needing these modules. That's why I'm importing here. Okay, and I'll cover these providers even services comes, because this will be tricky. Even if I tell also, it will be difficult to understand. Okay, so these two sections, one is to declare all your components inside a module, and the second one is to import modules. It could be a third-party modules, or it could be part of your Angular framework. So this common module is Angular framework, and this HTTP client module is part of your HTTP framework from the Angular. The same routing module also part of the Angular framework, and your browser module, forms module, all these are part of Angular. If you see @Angular, that is basically Angular framework. Okay. Now the quiz component is created. Okay. So now how can we use that quiz component? Like this, right? So just go to the quiz component, and you can see the name. Okay. So now let me go to the app component.ts. Let me go to the app component.html. Let me remove all this. Okay. Let me just paste that here. We have to basically use like a tag, right? HTML. Okay. Now I am calling my app quiz component. Let me go to the browser. Localhost. I changed the port. Okay. I am basically running other applications. I'm using 5000 for this. Now it's saying quiz works. Okay. But from where this quiz works is coming. So basically this is HTML, right? Whatever you're seeing here is HTML. So this is basically a paragraph tag. I can right click and inspect, and I can see this is a paragraph tag. And this is the component I'm using. So inside the component, the paragraph tag is coming, and it is closed here. Okay. Now let's go to the quiz component, where we have quiz component here. Okay. We have 4 files, and one of the file is the app quiz component, and it has this HTML, it has this CSS. Let's go to the HTML. So this is where my paragraph tag is saved, right? So from here, it is fetching the template, and it is showing here, because whenever my application is launched, first it will try to render the app component. So this is basically the app root, right? The app root coming from index.html. You remember?
Yes, sir. Yeah, I do.
In the index.html, we have app root. Let me remove this one. So basically in the raw HTML, you are rendering the app component. This one. In the app component, you are rendering the app
The app.
quiz. So that's the reason. First, it is rendered the app component. App component doesn't have anything else. Only it has a app quiz. So that's the reason it is showing this one. Let's say to change this one, what we can do? We can go to the app quiz component, and I can say H4 is component change. Let me save it. Whenever I save it, it will refresh the file and it will relaunch it. Immediately it will, you see the reflected HTML here. Okay. So yeah. So that's how you can create components and use components. So you can create another component, quiz1. Okay. Let me create it. Again, it will create same set of 4 files inside the quiz1 folder, and then it will update my app module.ts. And while updating, what it will do, it will basically add the quiz1 component here in the declaration section. Okay, so now let me go back to the quiz1. You can do the same thing. It will add the quiz1 works, and it will have add the selector and all these files. So now let me change it to quiz1 h3. Let me save it here. In order to use this template or use this component, I have to go to app component and I have to paste it here. So this is coming from app component, the quiz, and this is coming from the quiz1. Okay. Now you can ask me, should I always use these components inside the app component? No, not necessarily. If I remove it, will go. Now let me go back to the app quiz here, and then let me go to the quiz component HTML and let me paste this. So now app component is calling quiz component and quiz component is calling app quiz1 component. So let me go here and see the same thing, because if you see, app root is nothing but your app component. It has the app quiz component, and app quiz component, if I expand, it has a H4. This is the first one, right? And the app quiz1 component, we are calling again another component from quiz component. And this one is basically again your app quiz1 HTML, right? The quiz1 works. So it's like, whatever you see on the screen, it's basically the components.
Can we call this quiz component and quiz1 component directly in the main?
I didn't get from.
Is it possible for us to call this quiz components directly in the main HTML along with the app root?
We can, but only thing is, we go to the app module.ts. We mentioned Bootstrap component is the app component, right? So we're telling Angular that, okay, use this component, Bootstrap component, and go here, and whatever is there must be inside the index.html. Otherwise, it will not find where to render our app component.
I got it.
Okay, so it's like a neatly organized tree.
Tree,
First,
yeah,
it will
it's like a chain.
form exactly.
Yeah.
So it will form from the app root, and from app root, it's up to you. Where whatever you want to put, you can put. So if you don't want to clutter this app component at HTML, what you can do is you can remove everything else. You can remove all these things. Just keep your component, and in that component, you can start using your other components. Okay, so that your app component will be neat and you'll have only one file. And then from this component, you can have all the other components.
I got it. So
Got it? Okay. Now this is how you can create components, and this is how you can basically use components, right? So Any other questions here? Because lifecycle hooks will basically take a long time, and we can cover this in the next session.
Actually, yeah,
Okay, you're good, right?
yes, sir. Everything is
Oh,
good.
okay, just go through this again, and I want you to practice, especially creating components and then using that components left and right. So you can use components from anywhere you want, right? So you can just follow this documentation, and you can just get familiarized with this topic.
Sure, sir. Sure.
Okay, sure then. Okay, let me stop the recording.